What's up, Scyushi Squad? We back in some more Trove to Trove, and today we're gonna be swapping over from the Tomb Raiser. I think we've got enough footage to see that the Tomb Raiser is definitely a viable character after the Delves update ends up going to the live server, but generally speaking, there's been a lot of talk of other characters being much stronger, which is still very apparent. Like, I want to get the point across, guys, that even though we were trying out the Tomb Raiser and the rework is awesome, it's still missing that little bit of extra power to make the Tomb Raiser keep up with some of the top tier characters. The point is that if you're not like going for 100% efficiency, you can still end up using the Tomb Raiser. So for today, we're going to be using the Ice Sage, swapping over to him because Ice Sage is incredibly powerful, and I think a lot of players take that for granted. Thankfully, people have been using it a lot more on the live server recently, but most of all this just because people have found out how efficient it is to use Ice Sages on Leviathans. But anyways, I was going through all of these different light banners, and we never really talked about these very much in videos, and I even now only briefly want to talk about it just because they're kind of a handful to deal with. So essentially, while you're going into the Delves, caves and stuff, defeating enemies, open boxes and stuff like that, you'll end up getting these various banners as drops, and then you can literally use those and combine those together into these light banners, which are literally going to be banners that you can actually equip on your character. And they all have a various range of stats that they end up giving. This one gives physical damage, jump, and attack speed, while this one does magic damage, jump, and movement speed. The one that we've got equipped here that we're going to craft is, or no, I don't want that one. That one's got movement speed. This is the one. So it's magic damage, flash capacity, and movements or and attack speed. So there's quite a few of them that are really good and really cool. All of them, of course, are going to end up having a light value as well, so it is kind of going to work out. My god, okay, that's not as good as I thought it was. There are some banners in here that are actually really good. Most of all, the ones that you get out of these bad boys, the pressure lock chest, you can get some really rare banners out of them. Some will even, they have such weird like effects on them, guys. I'm not even joking. There's one that makes it so that the amount of nitro that you get, you have a 50% chance of getting additional nitro while you're farming it. Like, who saw that coming as a banner ability? Like, it's just so weird. So we could open all of these, but I don't know. Maybe I'll do that later or something. I don't really care right now. The only biggest problem that I'm running into with all of these banners is, as you can see, they really fill up your inventory fast. And the problem is that you really need to have and keep all of these banners in order to actually get any of these ones through crafting. Like, it's very weird and kind of clunky to me, because when you consider a free-to-play player isn't going to end up having all the additional inventory space, and then these are just going to fill up your inventory, you're going to be forced out of the, forced out of the Delves quite often if you can't make it to the end, and of course end up using the loot collector at the end. But anyways, now I gotta give you guys a quick little message. If you are new to Trove and well, if you're new to Trove, use a sign-up link that's down in the description right now, and then anything you end up buying out of the cash shop, I'll end up making a cut of that. It's an awesome way that you can support me, especially in these times where, I mean, your guys' jobs have probably changed a lot with all the quarantine. Me, I'm still just literally sitting at home recording stuff, so I'm very fortunate for that. I'm not trying to, like, be bragging about it. I'm saying thank you. That's kind of my point, because it's thanks to all of you guys watching that I literally am able to do this for a living. So anyways, let's hop into the Delves. We can also, just for kicks, because we are staying at 35 KPR, we're rocking our full Crystal Force set, which is not a perfect set. Obviously, we got the energy regen on our staff, which I would much rather that be crit damage so that we could just have the attack speed as the 4th stat. But I mean, this is just what I had it rolled from the second stat reroll event, so it doesn't matter too much. Which one are the Delves like challenge ones? That's the skeleton one. So unfortunately, we are gonna kind of start at a lower floor, guys. Or when I say lower floor, I mean literally a higher floor, because the deeper you go, the more difficult it gets. It's so tough to talk about like the Delves floors and stuff like that. But all the enemies generated with dark, so okay, cool, whatever, that's fine. Let's see how this character fares. The one thing that I'm really worried about is just the fact that we're going to be dealing with all these enemies wandering around. Like, ranged enemies is just instantly a joke. You cannot do that like as Ice Sage or any ranged character, to be fair. But as you can see, our normal damage, that's not too bad. If we use our ultimate ability, it gives us more attack speed and damage. If we freeze the enemies, they take additional damage as well. I didn't see the difficulty with which we were in here, but it seems like Ice Sage can handle the melee characters just fine. This is also probably quite difficult enemies, just because I'm noticing like how strong they actually are. Like, I mean, we're also stuck at Jurassic. Come to think of it, this might be the same one that we got stuck with my Tomb Raiser, unfortunately. So I guess if you're soloing, obviously Ice Sage is not going to end up doing that well, because Ice Sage doesn't do the best against groups. Against individual bosses, though, no problem. What you're going to basically do for these challenge delves, it seems, if you're a freak like me and you're trying to actually solo it, is you're just going to want to... You're going to want to literally have like a character to deal with all the enemies. Probably Draco, just because it's one of the easier characters to farm groups of enemies with without taking any damage or anything like that. And then maybe swap to Ice Sage or other characters when you're dealing with the bosses. I mean, in which case, why wouldn't I just end up swapping to Gunslinger instead? You know, because the damage is going to end up being slightly better on Gunslinger, especially for the bosses. That's the big thing that I'm talking about here, because the biggest thing about the delves is there's two different types of gameplay here, which is basically just what you're seeing here. We're dealing with a crap ton of enemies, or we're dealing with a single enemy, in which case you want to have the best single target damage in the game, which is still going to essentially end up being the Gunslinger. Ice Sage still doesn't handle it half bad, though, especially with the Clash Gem ability. There we go. When they get all clumped together and you start seeing that stacking damage, that's when it just is annihilating them. We might be able to do this, but honestly speaking, we need 224 enemies, so I will be shocked and amazed if we can end up getting through this. The other thing, too, is you gotta consider, especially with Jurassic, because these enemies are a joke, just because they have that winding punch move that they do. I mean, here's another tactic you can easily do to end up annihilating the enemies. This works for most ranged characters in the game. But Ice Sage isn't going to have as much survivability as some of the other classes, just because... I mean, especially against the ranged enemies, like, that's just going to be an utter joke. You're not going to be able to solo as an Ice Sage, which you're not intended to. I know that that's the point. I know a lot of you guys keep saying that. But that's the thing, is I'm trying to approach this as showing how powerful one character can end up being. Because as soon as we start talking about groups, I mean, then all you really gotta do is just have a group of the top tier characters. Like if we had an Ice Sage comboed with a Revenant for tanking and pulling all the enemies in, I mean, that would just make the delves kind of a joke. Other characters complement it very well as well. One of the first times that I ended up going into delves, I ended up duoing it with an Ice Sage, and I was on Draco, and it ended up working out extremely well, because the Ice Sage, the Ice Sage actually slows down enemies and slows down their attacks and their movement speed. So it's very, very useful when you have like a group and maybe they don't have that much survivability, because you literally will keep the enemies at bay without needing to rely on Draco baby minions. That said, the Draco is just a very powerful character, so that's why I like using it. Not to mention just your, babies take all of the aggro. But as far as ranged enemies, I mean, we're going to hopefully be able to skip this and just kill the enemies in the other rooms, just because ranged enemies are an absolute joke. Like, there is no possible way we would be able to do that, just because they would slowly whittle down my pots, and there's nothing we could do about it. Man alive, when we fight these enemies that don't have, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think these enemies had darkness on them. Or did they? Oh no, they do. Okay. They clearly do. Yeah, that Clash Gem ability is just so overpowered, dude. When it procs, it's just, so strong. I very much doubt that we're going to be able to do this in time, just because we are one person. Not to mention, we're still in Jurassic, so these enemies do generate stronger than the other biomes, unfortunately. It's a bit of an oversight from the devs, I'd say, where they didn't rebalance these enemies to be the same damage numbers that most of the other biomes are. And you could say that that's on purpose, but I know 100% that it's not, because the way that these enemies work, as far as their code is concerned, the amount of attacks that they do and stuff like that, like, basically the Jurassic enemies were, at a point, they were one of the most recent enemies added to the game, and the developers, this is Trion Worlds, when they were in charge of the game, not Game Ago like they are now, when the Jurassic enemies were added to the game, they added a whole bunch of different attack animations and stuff. As you can see right now, they got that wind-up punch, and that's probably one of the strongest attacks in the game, outside of when you deal with a launcher enemy that will literally just throw a grenade launcher attack at you that will literally just one-shot you. These guys do a pretty good job one-shotting you with their punches as well, so long as you're a properly built DPS character, which means you have no life. But the thing is that because these enemies have so much additional attacks, it makes them a force to be reckoned with compared to a lot of the other enemies in the game that were added before the Jurassic biome. Because anything after the Jurassic biome has had some of these enemies reskinned, you know, the Forsaken Spires, which is one of the most beautiful biomes in the game, I would still argue, and I'm excited to see what the caves are going to actually look like. But those guys, some of them are reskinned enemies, the same as the dinosaurs. Like, it just takes these enemies and reskins them. So some enemies in that biome can end up being tough, but these guys are just ridiculously overpowered. Okay, yeah, we got 1 minute left to kill like 90 enemies. It's just, frankly speaking, not possible right now, unfortunately. It doesn't matter about our damage or anything. You can see because they're doing their dumb wind-up punch and it's got an insane amount of range on it. You see they keep constantly trying to cast it, even though they're not even near me, because it would still end up hitting me. Like, that attack is extremely overpowered, and just please nerf devs, like, seriously. And unfortunately, it means that it's taking us too long to end up killing all these enemies, just because of the fact that, I mean, they stay like so far away and we can't kill them fast enough, because that's the whole thing, is it's just about killing in bulk. That's one of the big reasons why, again, I keep referring to and trying to use Draco in instances like this, because Draco is probably one of the best for group farming enemies. Gunslinger's good, of course. Gunslinger is going to end up doing a fantastic job just with raw strength killing, but the fact is you are completely reliant on your ultimate ability, as opposed to somebody like the Draco, where you literally are just spamming your enemies and you've just got like so much like crowd control to the class, you know what I mean? Which even then, we'll still end up trying out a Gunslinger in the Delves, guys. Keep in mind that, unfortunately, I don't want to fight this singular enemy. Keep in mind that, unfortunately, I do not have a Crystal 3 gun. Not even, like, I don't, let alone a Crystal 4 gun, because the devs still haven't gotten back to me about giving me all of the other Crystal gear and stuff. So I should probably end up emailing them. A lot of you guys also seem to think that I have, like, some type of deep, direct contact with them or something like that. It's not what you think, guys. I literally have a couple contacts over at Game Ago, and then they usually will end up relaying, okay, all we've got is ranged enemies to deal with. They will literally end up just relaying a lot of the information that I end up asking them to the developers, and it's very, very slow system that they've got in place. I can't complain. I'm just trying to put into perspective for you guys. It's not like I have one of them in my Discord and I just DM them this stuff and then they just hook me up. It takes a long time, and half the time this happens and they will end up forgetting to reply, which, I mean, that depends on who I'm talking to. They keep on sending me to talk to different people over and over. It's not as glamorous as you would think. It's just kind of a fortunate effect of you know, doing all these videos and stuff, is that I do have a contact with them. Best of all is my contact over at Game Ago. You know, he's the guy who ended up hooking me up with that kind of affiliate link for Trove that we mentioned at the beginning of the video. But the whole thing is that he just works at Game Ago in general, so anytime I'll ask him for something in game, he has to get in contact with the developers of the game, and then I get it relayed back. So to make it easier for him, he usually gives me like a dev contact. And I mean, well, anyways, I don't mean to ramble about that or anything. I'm just trying to put it into perspective for you guys. This is actually terrible, though. Like, I can't believe how bad it is dealing with ranged enemies as the Ice Age. Like, it's already jank in general dealing with ranged enemies, but you can see how half of our attacks aren't working. That's just because Trove in general, ranged characters have a very, very hard time hitting ranged enemies, just because hit detection is just an absolute joke in this game, especially with the recent lag that we've been dealing with. Oh, we actually ran out of flasks too. Jesus Christ. Okay. Well, funny enough, even though we're out of flasks, so I think we're gonna fail no matter what we do, because there is no way that you can salvage something like this if you don't end up having flasks. But I probably should have just been on my Vanguard if he's strong enough to defeat all these enemies. It depends on the difficulty. and then tried to go through it that way. Let's take a quick little peek, okay? Let's do an experiment, and then if I can't get through this fast enough, then unfortunately this is going to end up being a cut short challenge here, guys. We'll probably end up, like, I'll have to do this with somebody else. Maybe I can get like Joe or Mark or something, and then we can end up going through them that way. If our Vanguard can't do it, which he might not be able to. It's just the fact that he's the only character I have my physical set on. I am still going to end up testing out the Revenant as well, but I don't have anything set up to do that today, unfortunately. But again, if you're soloing this, you know, obviously it's going to be a little bit trickier. You're going to have to basically use one character to get through the enemies and then another character to deal with the single target of a boss. And I don't want to end up swapping my gems over to Gunslinger or anything like that just yet, just because of the fact that we are, you know, trying to test out the Ice Sage with some other stuff as well. So we'll go through all of the magic characters, all the staff wielding characters with my Crystal 4 gear, and then for some of these other characters, we'll try them out in Delves as well. But just keep in mind that I don't really have Crystal 4 for all the classes just yet, so we'll see what happens with that. Anyways, let's see, how do we actually fare against these guys as Vanguard? Nope. Absolute joke. This is actually really good to put into perspective, guys, just because I know that a lot of you guys tuning in sometimes are like, why don't you try out this character? Why don't you try out this character? Especially when I'm doing like streams trying out the Delves. This is why, because a lot of you guys don't realize just how difficult the Delves actually are. I mean, granted, I should be using Unyielding so that they're not draining my flask, but this right here is the problem that I still have with the Delves. They're an unbalanced mess. Certain characters in the game are completely unviable as far as the Delves are concerned. And who do you blame for that one? Well, unfortunately, we have to blame the developers. Now, I'm not saying that we sit here and hate on the game or anything like that, but this just goes to show you can only use a handful of the top of the line characters to end up successfully getting through the Delves, because otherwise it frankly just does not work. The only reason we even talk about the Revenant being a physical character that has to get up close and personal, the only reason we even talk about him in the higher tiers of Delves is because Revenant is one of the only physical characters that can survive almost anything. So long as you have enough health that you don't get one shot, Revenant actually has a very, very, very powerful life-stealing ability where you'll hit an enemy and it will literally just boop, all your life is just back. Like, he is insanely powerful for that. Not to mention his ultimate ability pulls all the enemies in. We could be using the vacuum as well to try and deal with a lot of these enemies as any other physical character, but it's just not going to work out that well for you. Candy Barb is probably viable. Probably. I mean, unless you'd have to have some pretty weird stuff going on. You know, you'd have to have some pretty weird flasks and emblems going on in order to not only keep you alive while you're sucking all the enemies in, but on top of that, you would have to have some form of gaining your flasks back, because you would not be able to tank out and survive all the way extended to the end on just the barbarians tanking alone, unless you had some really, really strange stuff going on. So anyways, we'll try out the Revenant at some other point. But one thing I do want to share with you guys very, very briefly, just to show you how crazy powerful the Ice Age can be in normal farming versus the Delves. Like, this is just a normal boss enemy, and I mean, look at that. That's how weak U10 gets. Okay? Like, when the Delves update comes out, it kind of makes the rest of the game a joke. It's absurdly powerful. And the Ice Age, like, I didn't even think that he was this strong. Like, I don't remember him being this powerful, let alone, like, you know, even on the live server right now, he is this strong. Like, you take him to the U10, Ice Age is extremely viable. It's actually hilarious. So you know what we'll do? We'll test him out against one of the tankier, not the tankiest, but one of the tankier enemies in the game. We'll go to a 3-star dungeon so that we can actually fight a 3-star boss, because these guys are a lot stronger than most enemies. But let's also use our ult here, and he still is just obliterated. Absolute joke. Now, I've seen a couple people also arguing that you can use the Ice Sage. Like, the Ice Sage is very, very viable for killing, farming with kills, okay? But the big reason why I and most other people don't actually use the Ice Sage for normal farming is because his getting from point A to point B is just not as good as some of the other speed farming characters, unfortunately. I mean, if you have movement speed on all of your gear, which you could sacrifice your attack speed or even your crit damage and get movement speed on your gear, and you would probably be fine as the Ice Sage, just because when you're in U10, you don't really need to be that powerful. Like, you don't need to be perfect stats to be able to waste all of these enemies, right? But that just goes to show how powerful the Delves truly are. So hopefully this was a good enough video for you guys to kind of test things out, test the waters as it were, because we've still got quite a bit to try out with this character. Most of all, I want to be able to actually find a proper group. I want to swap over my Vanguard set to the Revenant and try him out and stuff like that. A lot of these tests as well, they don't 100% go as expected or as planned, because I like to do these blind with you guys so that I can get a genuine reaction of, is this character viable? Yes, no. Ice Sage is definitely viable, has been for a very long time since the Ice Sage rework, and is extremely viable even right now on the live server for killing things in U10. It's funny how players only recently just discovered like how powerful the Ice Sage actually is against Leviathans, just because of the fact that the Ice Sage is a very powerful character. And again, arguing the point that the Gunslinger, I would say, even though he does have the highest damage numbers in the game, yes, he's burst damage. You can only use him viably with your ult, and you can only do your ult so many times before you're out of flash. So as long as whatever you're fighting as the Gunslinger dies within that period, Gunslinger is going to end up being the absolute best. But as soon as it comes to survivability, Gunslinger just gets thrown along with the rest. Not really, because Gunslinger is still extremely powerful, but I just wanted to make the point across, because a lot of you guys have been talking about using Gunslinger in the Delves, and I mean, Gunslinger's got the damage, that's for sure, but as soon as we deal with a room full of ranged enemies, we're gonna start losing flash fast. That said, we will end up doing a video on pretty much, well, maybe not all of the characters. I mean, I could do all the classes if you guys want, but it seems pointless to do like the Neon Ninja, for example, in the Delves. Like, it just, I don't know. I mean, maybe we could do that just for the memes, just so that you Neon Ninja mains out there can feel sorry about yourselves and how weak the Neon Ninja actually is for some form of challenge other than speed farming. Or better yet, we could use the Chloromancer. Everyone knows the Chloromancer is a joke. Even Chloromancer mains know that the Chloromancer sucks. Like, that's how bad this class is. It's too bad, too, because Chloromancer as a class, as a character, I very, very much enjoy. When the Chloromancer first came out, I thought it was dope AF, but the damage just gets thrown, like, under the bus. Anyways, that's enough rambling. Thank you so much for watching. Smash like, sub for more. Have yourselves a fantastic day. Sign on, and stay epic, gamers.